Egos are fragile. Things more fragile than the people who wield them. They shatter at the slightest blow, crack under the weight of even a passing challenge. When faced with your strength, your defiance, the core of their identity crumbled. It wasn't your presence alone that did it. It was your refusal to bend, to bow, to shrink into the shape they demanded. That kind of resilience terrifies the weak. Strength, held firm in the face of their games, left them with nothing to cling to but their own broken pride. Pride feeds on dominance, on control, and your existence robbed them of both. Every word you spoke, every step you took, was a threat to the delicate balance they worked so hard to maintain. Their ego was built on being the biggest presence in the room, the loudest voice, the heaviest shadow. But your strength, calm, quiet, unyielding, was a storm that swept through, revealing their grand illusions for what they were: smoke, mirrors, and lies. You didn't play their game, and that was your ultimate power. The strongest people don't have to raise their voices. Your silence cut sharper than their loudest insults. It wasn't just what you did, it was what you didn't do. You didn't engage in their petty battles, didn't flinch when they tried to test your limits. That restraint, that refusal to stoop to their level, was maddening. They relied on your reaction to validate their ego, but you gave them nothing. And in the absence of control, their fragile confidence began to unravel. Your strength wasn't in brute force, but in an unshakable sense of self. They wanted you to need them, to crave their approval, but you never did. Independence is a blade that cuts deeply, and your self-reliance sliced through the facade they had carefully constructed. They mocked your strength to disguise their fear of it, because to admit your power was to admit their own inadequacy. The very foundation of their ego depended on your submission, and when you refused to give it, their world began to collapse. Envy crept in like a shadow, dark and all-consuming. They couldn't handle what they couldn't control, couldn't accept what they couldn't diminish. Your strength exposed the crack in their armor, the flaws in their design. It forced them to confront the limits of their own power. They tried to break you not because they hated you, but because they hated the reflection of their weakness that you so effortlessly revealed. Your strength wasn't just a challenge, it was a mirror, and what they saw in it horrified them. Control is the lifeblood of the ego, and you took that from them. You didn't fight on their terms, didn't succumb to their manipulations. That refusal to play by their rules was an act of war, a rebellion they couldn't counter. They tried to diminish your strength with their words, their actions, their schemes, but nothing worked. Every attempt to crush you only highlighted your resilience, and that was a humiliation they couldn't bear. Their ego couldn't withstand the constant reminder that they had met someone unbreakable. In their eyes, strength meant power over others, domination through fear. But your strength was different. It didn't rely on crushing others to stand tall. It was internal, a force born from enduring, from knowing who you were and never apologizing for it. That kind of strength is rare, and rare things are often misunderstood. They called it arrogance, defiance, stubbornness, but deep down, they knew the truth. Your strength was something they could never possess, and that knowledge was their undoing. Watching you rise was a torment they couldn't escape. Every step you took forward, every achievement, every moment you stood tall in the face of their attempts to tear you down, it all chipped away at the foundations of their ego. Their pride couldn't handle the fact that they had tried and failed to control you. As you grew stronger, their envy turned to bitterness, their bitterness to despair. They couldn't admit it, but your strength became the ghost that haunted them, a constant reminder of their own weakness. You became the storm they never anticipated, the force they couldn't reckon with. They wanted to break you, but your strength wasn't something that could be broken. It wasn't a shield, it was the core of who you were. And now, as they stand in the ruins of their own pride, their failure is etched into every bitter glance, every hollow word. You didn't just survive their attempts to crush you, you thrived. And in doing so, you reduced their ego to ashes. The world is full of thieves, not just those who steal gold or jewels, but those who steal pride, who twist success into shame. People will diminish your victories, claim your achievements were mere luck, or attempt to rewrite the narrative of your life to make themselves feel bigger. But the real danger isn't the thief outside. It's the one within. The voice that questions your worth, that doubts whether you deserve the things you fought for, that whispers insidious lies about how you're not enough. That voice, if left unchecked, will do the job better than anyone else ever could. Success makes you a target. Those who lack the ambition to build something of their own find joy in dismantling what others have created. They'll chip away at your accomplishments, frame them as insignificant, as though tearing you down will somehow lift them up. But no one can take away what you refuse to relinquish. Your victories, no matter how small, are monuments to your resilience, your defiance, your strength. They are yours, forged in fire, paid for with your effort and your blood. Protect them as fiercely as you would protect your life, for they are one and the same. The world loves to turn success into something shameful, to make people apologize for their wins. Humility, they call it, though it's nothing more than an excuse to shrink yourself to fit into the small boxes others have built for you. But shrinking serves no one, least of all yourself. Your accomplishments are not accidents, not gifts. They are the result of your will, your refusal to break under pressure, your relentless pursuit of what others deemed impossible. To downplay that is to insult everything you've endured, every obstacle you've overcome. The inner thief, the one who doubts, who questions, who fears, feeds on those external voices. Every time someone diminishes your accomplishments, that voice grows louder. Insistent, it whispers that they might be right, that maybe you were just lucky, that maybe you don't deserve the things you've worked so hard for. But luck doesn't build legacies. Luck doesn't endure sleepless nights, endless sacrifices, relentless criticism. Only strength does that, and your strength, your achievements, are undeniable, unless you allow them to be. To protect your accomplishments, you must first protect your mind. The thoughts you entertain, the stories you tell yourself, shape the way you view your victories. If you allow doubt to creep in, if you let those external voices become internal, you risk losing everything you've built. People will always try to tear you down. That's a given. But the real battle is within. The real challenge is silencing the voice that seeks to take away what's rightfully yours. Your achievements are not just milestones. They are weapons, sharp and unyielding. Each one is a testament to the battles you fought and won, the moments when giving up would have been easier, but far less satisfying. People will try to disarm you, to dull the edges of your accomplishments, to make them seem less threatening. But a dull blade is useless, and your victories are not meant to be hidden or softened. Let them shine. Let them cut. Let them remind the world of who you are and what you've done. There is power in refusing to apologize for your success. Those who mock your accomplishments are often those who lack their own. Their envy, their bitterness is not your burden to carry. Let them scoff. Let them diminish. Their words hold no power unless you allow them to. Stand tall in the face of their ridicule, for every sneer is an acknowledgement of your strength. Your achievements are proof that you dared, that you succeeded where others failed. No one can take that from you unless you let them. Protecting your accomplishments is not arrogance. It is survival. The world is full of people who will try to erase your legacy, to rewrite your story so that it fits their narrative. But your story is yours alone. Your victories are not up for debate, not subject to anyone else's interpretation. Guard them. Celebrate them. Let them be the foundation upon which you build even greater things. And when others try to take them away, remind them and yourself that those victories were earned, not given, and that they are yours to keep. When we remove ego, we're left with what is real. Ego is the great illusionist, a master at crafting shadows and calling them substance. It hides behind achievements, disguises itself as pride, and whispers that strength is measured by domination, not resilience. But ego is not strength. Ego is fragile, a hollow shell that cracks under the weight of reality. To strip it away is to face the raw, unvarnished truth of who we are. That terrifies most people, but not you. You've already seen what lies beneath and you've embraced it. The real you is unshakable, not because of ego, but because of its absence. Ego blinds, it distorts. It convinces people that power comes from others' submission, that validation must come from outside. But real power comes from within, from knowing your worth without needing others to confirm it. Those who cling to ego rely on the world to prop them up, to validate their existence. And when the world fails them, as it always does, they crumble. Removing ego is an act of rebellion, a refusal to let the external dictate the internal. It's a dangerous act, one that leaves you exposed, but also indomitable. What remains after ego is stripped away. Ego is far more dangerous than ego itself. Ego feeds on fear, on the need for control, but without it, you are free. Free to face yourself without pretense, free to stand tall without the need for applause. Those who mocked you, who tried to tear you down, relied on their egos to sustain them. Their pride was their armor, and when it shattered, they were left with nothing. You, however, stand untethered, unburdened by the need for anything but your own conviction. Removing ego reveals strength that ego could never provide. It's not the loud, boastful kind of strength that demands attention, but the quiet, steady kind that commands respect. Those who saw your strength mistook it for arrogance because they could not fathom confidence without ego. But your confidence was never about them. It was about knowing yourself. Their envy, their attempts to diminish you, were born from their own fragile egos. They couldn't understand that what they mocked wasn't ego. It was authenticity. Ego is the mask most people wear to hide their insecurities. It's a shield, not a sword, and it shatters the moment it's tested. When people tried to challenge you, they expected to find weakness hidden beneath your strength. But there was no weakness, no mask to tear away. What they found was real, solid, unbreakable. They lashed out because your lack of ego exposed their own. Without ego, there is no facade, no illusion, only the undeniable reality of who you are. Those who depend on ego to define themselves will always fall when it fails them. Ego demands constant feeding, praise, attention, control, and when it's denied, it withers. People who rely on it are trapped in a cycle of needing and never having enough. Your strength, rooted in reality, needed no such sustenance. While others crumbled under the weight of their own insecurities, you rose unencumbered. The absence of ego wasn't your weakness. It was your liberation. Without ego, there is clarity. You see things as they are, not as your pride demands them to be. That clarity is a weapon, one that cuts through the illusions others try to project. Those who mocked you tried to hide behind their egos, but their attempts to diminish you only revealed their own emptiness. They relied on their egos to shield them, but when faced with someone who needed no such shield, they faltered. Your strength was a mirror, reflecting their weakness back at them. Ego creates enemies, turns allies into rivals, and breeds envy where there should be admiration. By removing it, you disarmed their attempts to make you doubt yourself. They couldn't comprehend your strength, couldn't handle the idea that you could exist without the need for validation, and as their egos shattered, so did their perception of power. You showed them that real strength isn't about dominance, it's about authenticity, about standing firm in who you are without the need for approval. Ego and love can never coexist. Ego craves control, and love demands surrender. The two cannot share the same space, for their needs are diametrically opposed. Ego builds walls, fortresses of pride and self-preservation, while love asks for vulnerability, a lowering of those defenses. Love seeks connection. Ego thrives on separation. Those who cling to ego cannot truly love. Their hearts are too wrapped in the chains of self-importance to open fully, and yet they pretend, speaking the words, mimicking the gestures, without ever feeling the depth. Their imitation of love is hollow, a reflection of their need to conquer, not to connect. Where ego thrives, love withers. Ego whispers of power, of dominance, of bending others to its will. Love, in contrast, is a quiet, steady force that grows only in the absence of ego's demands. Ego demands to be fed. Love asks to be given freely. Ego seeks validation, while love exists without it. Those who allow their ego to rule are incapable of love, because love requires the one thing ego cannot tolerate: humility. And so their relationships become battlegrounds, not sanctuaries. Their connections are poisoned by the very force they refuse to let go of. Ego's greatest weakness is its inability to share space. It must always be the loudest voice, the center of attention, the driving force. Love, on the other hand, thrives in the quiet spaces, in the moments where ego is silent. But silence terrifies the ego, for in it lies the risk of being forgotten. Ego must constantly assert itself, constantly demand acknowledgement, and in doing so, it smothers the very things that could bring genuine connection. Love cannot breathe in the suffocating atmosphere of ego's constant need for recognition. Those ruled by ego will never understand the beauty of love untainted by self-interest. To love without ego is to give without expectation, to share without seeking anything in return. But ego is transactional. It gives only to gain. It cannot comprehend love as a selfless act because ego's very existence depends on being the center of its own universe. When love enters the picture, ego feels threatened, overshadowed, diminished, and so it lashes out, sabotaging what could have been beautiful in an effort to maintain its fragile dominance. Ego fears love because love cannot be controlled. It is wild, unpredictable, and unyielding to ego's attempts to shape it. Love asks for trust, for surrender, for letting go of the need to dominate. Ego cannot comply. To do so would be to admit weakness, to give up the illusion of control. And so, those who choose ego over love find themselves alone, their relationships hollow and transactional. They may call it love, but it is nothing more than a performance, a shadow of what love truly is. Ego turns love into a weapon. It twists affection into manipulation, turns vulnerability into a game of power. Where love seeks to unite, ego seeks to divide, to use the connection as a tool for its own gain. Those who let their ego lead their relationships reduce love to a currency, something to be traded, hoarded, or withheld. And in doing so, they destroy the very essence of what makes love powerful, its ability to transcend, to heal, to create bonds that ego could never understand. The absence of ego in love is its greatest strength. Without ego, love becomes pure, untainted by the need for validation or control. It exists as a force unto itself, independent of circumstance, free from the shackles of expectation. But those who cling to ego will never know this kind of love. They will chase power, seek control, and call it love, but their hearts will remain empty. Love asks for everything. Ego is unwilling to give, and so it eludes those who need it most. Ego and love are locked in eternal conflict, and only one can survive. Those who choose love must kill their ego, let it die so that something greater can take its place. But most are too afraid to let go, too enamored with the illusions their ego provides. They hold on to it, clutching it like a lifeline, even as it drags them down. And in doing so, they lose the one thing that could save them. Love requires sacrifice, and ego demands self-preservation. The two cannot coexist. Vanity is a master of disguises, cloaking itself in virtue in causes so grand that no one dares question the motives behind them. The most egotistical men are rarely those who roar about their greatness. They are the ones who whisper, who wrap their arrogance in the language of care and compassion. They create illusions, facades of generosity and kindness, not because they wish to heal the world, but because they wish to shield themselves from scrutiny. Beneath their humanitarian masks lies something vile, a hunger not for betterment but for control, for admiration, for power dressed as selflessness. Humanitarianism, when tainted by ego, becomes a weapon. It is wielded to silence critics, to build monuments, not to the betterment of others, but to the egotist's own image. Acts of supposed generosity are broadcast like fireworks, their light meant to blind rather than illuminate. Those who dare question the sincerity of such acts are branded cynics, enemies of progress. The egotist knows how to play the game, how to turn virtue into armor and weapon alike. They seek not to serve, but to conquer, not to uplift, but to dominate. The ugliest truths are often hidden behind the prettiest lies.